Hello there, thrill seekers. That was a little bit of the song Miserlou as played by Dick Dale, aka the theme song to Pulp Fiction. Played that because on Wednesday I'm going to go audition for rhythm guitar in a surf band that's located around here. So I've been learning that song, but thankfully they don't want me to play the lead part because that lead part, which you just heard, is really hard with that picking, that sort of like flamenco style picking. It hurts my forearm. Can you see how painful that is? Anyway, so I thought I would talk about a question because I received a question in the emails, which my email, by the way, is bw@hardcorezen.info. You can always write me emails there. And I got this question, and as you know, since before your sun burned hot in space and before your race was born, I have awaited a question. And I say that because I really do like getting Zen questions from the audience. It helps me figure out what sort of content to make for this video channel. Because sometimes I feel like I'm just flailing around. Like I have no idea what people really want to hear. So when I get a question, then I get an idea what people want to hear. So here is the question. Here we go. It says, have you heard of Jim Newman and Tony Parsons? Do you have an opinion about their way of pointing at non-duality? I have heard the name Tony Parsons, and I've watched bits and pieces of some videos. I've never heard of Jim Newman at all. They are on YouTube, and you can check out The Open Secret book by Tony Parsons, too. Okay, so the rest of the question. So basically they say there is no way to liberation because liberation already is the case no matter what happens. Sound familiar, right? But they also say you can do Zazen and try to get liberation, and that's also fine, but no matter how much you understand or meditate, liberation always remains the case. So they say the only illusion is that you are watching, eating, speaking, etc., when in fact there is just watching, just eating, just speaking, etc. And then the final bomb they like to drop is that when illusion drops, it's like nothing happened and no one gets anything. Maybe you can make a video on these guys if you feel like. Okay, so here I am making the video. The answer I gave him, I started off by quoting, well, I didn't start, but I quoted a section of Genjo Koan by Dogen. So Genjo Koan is probably Dogen's greatest hits. If Dogen was the Beatles, then Genjo Koan would be Yesterday. You know, if Dogen was Deep Purple, Genjo Koan would be Smoke on the Water. If he was Led Zeppelin, Genjo Koan would be Stairway to Heaven. So that's his biggest hit. It's a short piece. It appears in almost every anthology. I was going to say every translation of Dogen's work includes Genjo Koan. Every English translation I know of. It's in my book, which one? Don't Be a Jerk. It's in my book, Sit Down and Shut Up. I believe parts of it are in my book, Hardcore Zen, but I may be wrong about that. In every anthology that people do of Dogen's work, or almost every anthology that people do about Zen, they'll throw in Genjo Koan because it's short and it kind of is to the point. It gets everything out there. But here is the end of Genjo Koan. It says, Zen Master Hotetsu of Myokuzan Mountain is using a fan. A monk comes by, and not an only fan type of fan, but a fan like you fan yourself with. Like in Japan, you fan, or in China too, you fan yourself with a fan. Okay, he's using a fan. A monk comes by and says, the nature of air is to be ever present, and there is no place that air cannot reach. Why then does the master use a fan? So obviously, I don't know if it's obvious, because I think to me when I first read this, it wasn't obvious because I'm dumb. But I think it's supposed to be obvious that the metaphor is about what this guy's talking about. If liberation is all around, why do practice? You know, why do anything? And the master says, "You have only understood that the nature of air is to be ever present, but you do not yet know the truth that there is no place air cannot reach." The monk says, "What is the truth of there being no place air cannot reach?" At this, the master just carries on using the fan. And the monk does prostrations, like, thanks, boss, thanks for the answer. And Dogen adds to this, and this is the end of the Genjo koan. He says, "The real experience of the Buddha Dharma, the vigorous road of the authentic transmission is like this. Someone who says that because the air is ever present, we do not need to use a fan, or that even when we do not use a fan, we can still feel the air, does not know ever presence and does not know the nature of air. Because the nature of air is to be ever present, the behavior of Buddhists has made the earth manifest itself as gold and has ripened the long river into curds and whey." That whole thing about ripen the long river into curds and whey, I don't really understand. What is my hair doing today? I don't really understand what that's all about, and so I'm going to kind of leave it alone. I think it just means it makes everything beautiful. It makes everything work as it should. I don't know why it's curds and whey and gold and little Miss Muffet sitting on her tuffet. I guess that hadn't been invented yet. But the idea is that, yes, enlightenment is all around. Liberation is all around. You are liberated now just as you are. You sitting there in your underwear watching this video on your phone, sitting on the toilet or whatever you're doing, you're just as liberated as the Buddha, as Dogen, as Tony Parsons, and who was the other guy? I've forgotten his name. Jim Newman, or Alfred E. Newman, or Paul Newman, or Newman from Seinfeld. You're just as liberated as any of them. And, this idea that you can do, you can do Zazen and try to get liberation, that's also fine, but no matter how much you understand or meditate, liberation always remains the case. Okay, yeah, sure. But I think a practice is necessary. Now, how to put this? I am a great fan of the Advaita Vedanta tradition. I am not a practitioner of the Advaita Vedanta tradition, and I believe that these folks, Tony Parsons and Alfred E. Newman, come from the Advaita tradition. My favorite Advaita thing is, I've talked about this tons of times, so if you've watched this video channel before, you've seen me talk about I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj. I've now read this book, I think 6 times all the way through, and I've marked it up with all kinds of marks and stuff because I really like it. I really like his way of expression. His student, Ramesh Balsekar, also pretty good. Not quite as good as Nisargadatta, if you want to know my opinion, but my favorite 2 books of his, which I've read both of these, are Pointers from Nisargadatta Maharaj and The Final Truth. They're both pretty good, and I like them from that tradition. Apart from that, I haven't really followed that tradition very much. I think my first introduction to that tradition was somebody giving me a copy of, oh Christ, what the hell is the thing called? The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I had to go look it up on the damn internet because my brain just, when I'm thinking of something else and trying to get on this video, then trying to come up with something like, Anyway, Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. People kept asking me what I thought of that, especially because we were published by the same people, New World Library. I've never met Eckhart Tolle, or I think it's Tolle is how you're supposed to pronounce his name. A lot of Americans just drop the E at the end, but in German you pronounce every letter. That was my kind of, here's my little capsule difference between Germany and France, because I went from Germany to France one time, and I understand a little bit of German and a little tiny bit of French. And I realized in German, you pronounce every letter, no matter what, and in French, you pronounce almost none of the letters. They just add all these extra silent letters in French, and German has no silent letters. Anyway, so Eckhart Tolle, reading The Power of Now, I was like, yeah, sure, this is great, but how do you do any of this? It was philosophically sound, I thought, and kind of not too different from the way Zen looks at things, but there was nothing about any sort of a practice in there. And this is what I think is perhaps lacking in that. Although my understanding is the Advaita Vedanta tradition kind of is open to any sort of practice. They don't really have a specific practice that they do, but if you want to do Zazen, when Nisargadatta Maharaj, whenever he talks to somebody about how to meditate, what he describes sounds almost exactly like Shikantaza style Zazen. He just, this kind of formless, go look up Shikantaza style Zazen. I've done so many explanations of that on this channel, I don't want to do it again. But it sounds almost like that. For me, just hearing, the idea in Advaita Vedanta, and people might argue about this, but this is my eyeball view of it, is that hearing what the truth is spoken in sort of straightforward language is gonna get you there. So they'll just tell you everything. There's a story that Shozan Jack Haubner, my friend who does the channel Zen Confidential, the YouTube channel, highly recommend that channel. He tells a story on one of his videos about Leonard Cohen, Leonard Cohen, the singer, was a student of his teacher, of Shozan Jack Haubner's teacher. What is his name? Oh, God. Joshu Sasaki Roshi. And so Joshu Sasaki Roshi, so he left at some point, Leonard Cohen left Joshu Sasaki Roshi and went and hung out with Ramesh Balsekar. Apparently Leonard Cohen, like me, had read I Am That, but by then Nisargadatta Maharaj was dead, but you could still go study with his student Ramesh Balsekar if you went to India. And so he went to India, studied with Ramesh Balsekar. And he came back eventually to Mount Baldy Zen Center with Joshu Sasaki Roshi, but he said something to, and he said this to Shozan, so Shozan can express it better than I can. He said something like, what I don't like about this Zen is everything's very cagey and they don't tell you what's going on, but if you go to the Advaita tradition, they just tell you everything and it's very straightforward. And I get why you'd feel like that, because if you read Dogen, everything is kind of like, well, I gave you the example of curds and whey. Why does he say curds and whey? I don't know. It's very poetic, and he uses the metaphor of the fan and stuff, rather than sort of straightforward saying, well, if you don't sit, you don't get enlightenment or something. That's not a good translation of what he just said in the piece that I just read, but it's something like that. Well, maybe that's a good example, because if you try to take that metaphor that I just told you about the guy with the fan and everything and boil it down to if you don't do Zazen, you don't get enlightenment. Well, that's not quite right. That's not quite what the metaphor is saying, and that's why you use a metaphor, because it's much more open-ended. So Zen is very sort of open-ended in what it says. Somebody the other day, and I should do a whole video about this, asked me about, I forget exactly what the question was, but embedded within the question was the claims made by Zen Buddhism. And I started thinking, are there any claims made by Zen Buddhism? Because other religions make claims, like Christianity claims that Jesus was the one true Son of God, and Islam says that Muhammad is his prophet, peace be upon him, all this stuff. So they make claims out the bum. But I don't know that Zen Buddhism makes any claims. I'd have to sit and think about this. I mean, the claim that people try to make for Zen Buddhism is that it claims reincarnation, but I reject that too. And a lot of people in the Zen tradition say, no, it doesn't really claim reincarnation. We can talk about that later. Other than that, it doesn't make any claims about what God is, what heaven is, what happens after you die, all this other stuff. There's sort of tacit assumptions made here and there about it, but no claims, as far as I know. So Zen doesn't make any claims, doesn't tell you anything. The problem with a philosophy that tells you everything is, it's giving you a specific point of view on that. It's giving you the way the teacher, your guru, if you're in the Advaita tradition, has come to understand it and has decided to express it. And that's the way he or she is expressing it. And you can learn that, But I think the problem is that can become a fixed thing. It can become like any other belief, and like the belief that Jesus Christ died for my sins, or the belief, I don't know, whatever belief you have. It can become like that, like a fixed belief, and you think that because you can say the words blah da 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 his blah blah, it doesn't matter what the words are. But booba da booba da booba da booba, you say those words, and then okay, that's it. That you got it. That's it. Done. Now go on to the next thing. Whereas Zazen is kind of this ongoing practice that reveals itself over time as you do it. I did Zazen this morning for who knows? I mean, it's certainly into the thousands or tens of thousands of times that I've done Zazen. Who knows? Hundreds of thousands? I don't know. Every day since 1982, pretty much. And maybe I've skipped a handful of days. But pretty much every day since 1982. So you go figure out how many that is. Every day, usually twice, sometimes 5 or 10 times a day. I've done it that much, and every time it reveals something new to me, including this morning. Nothing great, no revelations I want to write home about, but this morning, just like every time I do it, I discovered something. So there you go. Nisargadatta Maharaj, his thing was concentrate on the thought I am. And, when I hear that, I'm like, it's as cryptic to me as Dogen's saying, think the thought of not thinking. But all of these things are ways to sort of get into it and ways to kind of become comfortable and be able to understand the true nature of things. But my other little piece of advice is don't try to pick and choose, and don't try to make your own Frankenstein version by reading, this tradition and that tradition and then cobbling it together. It's really better to find one tradition and stick with that. Now, there are some bad traditions out there, and there are some that are not going to get you anywhere but trouble. But I think there are probably more good traditions, and it's not that hard. Sometimes it's hard. It's not always that hard to spot the phonies and the fakes, but yeah, you can get kind of down the wrong path for a while. Anyway, sorry, that was a little bit of a diversion. The thing is, take that one path and see where that goes. Make sure it's not a stupid path or something weird or some cult or whatever. But once you've recognized that, then follow that one and see where it gets you. I think that's the best strategy. So there you go. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to title this video, but I was thinking of saying Tony Parsons is wrong or something like that. I probably won't do that. But the point is, I don't think they're wrong philosophically when I hear that stuff, but the idea that practice is kind of arbitrary, or practice can be dispensed with and you can just learn it, you can just hear the information and be like, oh, that's the way it is. If you want to know my opinion, I don't think that's going to work. It hasn't worked for me. And I always had to do a practice, and the practice reveals all kinds of stuff, well beyond the parameters of anything any guru or teacher or book could tell you, because you're going to find it for yourself. And that's something, when I think about it in terms of guitar playing, that little piece that I played at the beginning, not entirely well, Miserlou by Dick Dale. He didn't write it, but he performed the version everybody knows. I had to find my own way to play that. I actually, a lot of times I'll look up tablature and things where people have figured out their way of playing things. With that, I didn't. I just heard the song and was like, okay, I guess that's what it sounds like, and then I learned to play it. And then my version is a little different. And it's my own version, and even if it's really, really close to Dick Dale's version, it's never going to be quite the same because it's coming out of me. That's kind of how it is. I don't know if that metaphor made any sense, but I feel like I've talked long enough. So there is your answer to that question, maybe not even an answer. All right, if you liked what you saw, or if you hated what you saw, or if you just want to donate for no particular reason, you can go to the URL that you're about to see on the screen below, or that you're about to hear if you're just listening to the audio version, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. Info/donate. That's where you'll find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts, and those are my main and only ways of making a living usually. And I appreciate your support, but you don't gotta support me if you don't want to. Okay, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey Ziggy, how you doing? You know, people complain that when I show them you to them on this video channel, you're always laying down. But what they don't know is you were barking and barking and barking like crazy up until about 10 minutes before I started making my video. They don't know that. And I had to show you that there's nobody outside except the garbage men who come every week. Okay, we'll see you later, Ziggy. Bye.